Hey guys, Justin here. And buddy, it is a cold day today. We were 85 degrees yesterday and it is 20 today. I don't know if you can see this shot outside. Something should be edited in. You can see we got a little bit of snow today. So anyways, what are you guys here for? Let's talk about chivalry. How was it in the Middle Ages compared to today? My name is Justin Kimple and this is Manuscript History. We can think of chivalry today as perhaps the way men are supposed to treat women, to be fair and kind, truthful, loyal, really a lot of different pleasantries and ways to be considered a gentleman more than anything. Holding the door open, giving your significant other your jacket when it's cold or maybe raining out, those kind of things. I mean, I totally do all of those all of the time, right, V? Where are you? In our time now, we have a very romantic notion of what chivalry is meant to be. But what was it like hundreds of years ago? Was it the knights in shining armor that we think of, seeking the affection of different maidens, or was it something else entirely? Let us first take a look at the word chivalry and where it comes from. To do this, we need to take a look at the origins of the knight. The first knights were essentially just warriors that had enough money and essentially the skill to ride a horse in battle. This comes into more prominence with the invention of two different things. One, you could say, would be the stirrup, so a warrior could brace themselves against a horse, and the other one mainly is the lance. The lance is a weapon that, with proper training of both the knight and the horse, could allow the knight to charge head-on into battle lines and deliver really devastating blows to then circle around, grab another lance, because they did usually break, and do it all over again. Wait. You wanted me to go back and do it again? I thought it was done already. The term chivalry itself comes from the old French word chevalier, which comes from the medieval Latin caballerius? Caballerios? No, that's Spanish. Caballerius. Hold on. Calaberi? I don't know how to pronounce it. What's it mean? Horseman. Caballerios. Spanish. Horseman. Okay, so essentially it's a Latin word that means horseman. So really anybody who knew how to fight on horseback was a chevalier, or a knight as the English would call it. So to be chivalrous originally meant to be good on horseback, or simply a horseman in Latin. So what was the meaning of chivalry then in the Middle Ages, that word? In truth, chivalry was something very different than what we think of. To some extent, it rises with the writers presenting ways for noblemen to be more civilized, and generally those stories revolve around a love interest of some kind. But the problem chivalry was trying to solve wasn't one of finding love, but one of lessening noble violence at the time. You see, in the early Middle Ages, noble violence was extremely common. After the fall of the Carolingian Empire and the rise of countless small lordships and counties, roaming bands of people and lords could essentially just go around and do anything that they wanted to, including pillaging and murder. The church, obviously extremely upset with the rise of noble violence, had tried to quell it in some fashion with the Peace and Truce of God movement, but that was only somewhat effective. Essentially, the Peace and Truce of God movement imposed spiritual sanctions on anyone who committed violence on days that it was not allowed. Yes, there were times of the month and week that it was permitted, but unfortunately, it didn't really seem to matter to most people. So what solution is there to quelling violence from people that have no laws to follow, rights of lordship that they've granted themselves, castles to protect it, and are generally unconcerned with spiritual sanctions of any kind? Well, I don't believe the church really ever found a solution to that. Because of the financial gain, it was going to be quite hard to convince these people to stop fighting each other. These people are very different from the chivalric knights we think of when we conjure images of the Middle Ages. Ultimately, however, it was clerical authors that will come to the rescue. I mentioned people writing about chivalry. Well, their stories of older heroic deeds and new interests in trying to stop violence were combined with ideas that appealed to nobles and ones that, in some cases, protected the innocent. This will create the beginnings of what we now, in a modern sense, might call a chivalric code. So how is a chivalric knight supposed to act according to these stories then? Well, it's mostly some pretty basic stuff that I think anyone today would recognize. They needed to be brave and honest, loyal, generous to others, display martial prowess in combat, and they should be courteous, speak well, and have good manners. Dude, what are you doing?
What?
What do you mean? I'm pretty sure we're supposed to be using one of these.
Where did you hear that?
Yeah, man. It's all in this book right here.
Are you sure it says that in there? I mean, this seems to work just fine.
I'm just kidding. I don't know how to read anyway.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
For the clerics, at least, the most important aspect, though, was that a man who is chivalrous uses his power to protect those who could not protect themselves, to defend the peasants of their land and clerics, widows and orphans, and so on. A chivalric knight was someone who leapt to the defense of others. Well, if that's what they were supposed to do, what is the whole finding love part then? The romance comes from the courtly love that many of these stories seem to present. In a lot of them, a knight is supposed to devote his life in order to gain the love of some fair maiden, for example. And if he does this, he is a better person and more inspired to defend the defenseless. So if all these things sound pretty great and fairly similar to what we expect people to act today, or at least we hope this is how people would act today, the difference really then comes from who these codes and ways of acting applied to, and who they actually protected, if anybody at all. The problem was that in the Middle Ages, there wasn't one specific way to be chivalrous. That all depended on who the knight was or who might be writing the book. Yes, like the clerics, some would be pushing peace, but many, many more took the notion to be chivalrous in a much more original and martial way. For example, when they thought of being a good chivalrous knight, they really only meant that they were brave and skilled warriors, and perhaps someone who could fight well on a horse. And the more battles that they won and the towns that they pillaged and the more money they got, well, the more chivalrous they were in their mind. There really were as many different ways for somebody to be chivalrous as there were lords of the land. In fact, many times the laws that a lord imposed upon his vassals and knights were what defined the chivalry of that land. The thing is, a lot of people today talk about the knight's code of chivalry, and really there was never such a thing in the medieval time. Some all-encompassing code that every knight followed was impossible because a lot of the time different chivalrous qualities from one place or one person to another could be completely different and contradictory to each other. And what if a knight didn't act in a chivalrous way? Were they punished somehow? Well, in some places, yes, punishment could be severe because it was also the law, but in many, it really didn't matter. Most noblemen would honestly just do whatever they wanted and could get away with. They were just humans, just like we are now. And the concepts of chivalry that you see today are really modern constructions that people fantasizing about the medieval life came up with. They are usually inspired by more medieval codes, yes, but generally they leave out the less acceptable ones by today's standards. Alright guys, I hope you liked this video. I hope it was helpful to you in some way and that you were able to learn something. Please, if you liked the video, hit that like button, and if you do want to see more, please subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell if you want to be notified when new videos come out. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye.